The year is 2025. We live in a dystopian world, and there's been a dumbing down of society. No, wait. The year is 2525 or 2505. We live in a dystopian world, and there's been a dumbing down of society. This is in the future. This is a film. This is Idiocracy. It's in the future. But look out your window now and watch it in HD. It's here.
I don't think I've had a lot of times where I watched a movie where I felt both filled with ridiculous joy at how on point something was with the humor, and how sad I was by the reality of shining a light or facing a mirror and seeing what the fuck it is that we are. There are going to be a lot of people, that if they do listen to this episode, they're going to say, you guys are exaggerating. It's not that bad. It'll never get that bad. But even when Idiocracy was being made, we were looking at television that was both the Jerry Springer Show, American Gladiators, all professional wrestling, this cancer that was this enjoyable cancer, no doubt, but a cancer that was spreading over the American psyche, the culture, and poisoning the fuck out of us. I don't claim to understand more than I understand, but I do recognize when something is dead on, and when the point being made is a hell of a lot sharper than people want to give it credit for. That being said, I think Idiocracy, at least half of the film, is brilliant. And it's strange that at 85 minutes, it can't sustain its power. I think it cops out to a degree. But what it gets right is far more, not even powerful, overpowering for a viewing audience. I think it's one of the greatest openings in any comedy film ever. And the rest of it is just so fucking on point that it's difficult to watch, knowing that if you're a somewhat intelligent person, this is either where we are or where we're going in the very near future. I disagree with you. I don't think we're there yet, but I definitely think we're going there. So,
I mean, yeah, we're not watering the crops with Gatorade.
Yeah, but we're spraying it with all kinds of fucking pesticides and other shit that's killing us. So the point is there. The point, the crops are growing. We're just killing ourselves. I mean, it's show me where the exaggeration in this film is imaginary. Show me where it doesn't. The greatest jokes, the best jokes, are the ones that have if not just a tinge, but a heavy-handed dose of truth. I don't see anything in this film that is not honest and telling of the culture that we live in. So yeah, we're not feeding the crops. We're not feeding the crops Gatorade, but we're doing. You were doing something.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This was maybe, I don't know, how many decades ago it was, but I saw It was a documentary on professional wrestling, and
Is that Beyond the Mat?
no. I don't remember the name of it. It was
Okay.
something that it's like lost to my mind. And it was comparing our society, then, which was probably, contemporary to this movie, and contemporary to, like The Apprentice and shows like that, that would create part of our situation currently. And it was comparing professional wrestling and the state of the world then to like Roman, like the audiences for professional wrestling. It was comparing them to Roman audiences. So I'm sure we could go back in time to social critiques that are thousands of years old and see parallels. If you look at, well, what's described in this film? Well, there's a dumbing down of society that's described in this film. That's what the whole film is. And people are depicted as being rude and crude. Logic and reason, they mean nothing. Society is violent, and it's sexualized, and it's focused on entertainment. That you can look back and say, well, that there are parallels. The difference is that in this future, we recognize the branding. We recognize the conglomerates that own everything. You have these dumb, angry mobs. Intelligence and being articulate is equated with being a, quote, fag.
That's my favorite thing in the movie.
A former prostitute ultimately becomes first lady. Are you guys catching on? The president's cabinet is a fucking joke. The president is an ex-wrestler. Everyone gets laid in the White House is a line in this film. Like, this is, a lot of times you hear it's like, well, this isn't a movie, it's a documentary.
Yeah.
It's not a documentary, but it is. Because, like I said, look out your fucking window at the state of the world, and this film from 2006, 2007 we're closer to it today than we were when it came out, when it was made.
Yeah.
There were the seeds of it obviously existed, and as I said, you could go back and find parallels throughout history where people are talking about how busy people were becoming in the cities and or in the city states and etc. How people were running around in this weird frenzy and etc. Now, does that mean that 20 years from now, if the world and if all of us on the world still exists, is it going to be closer to it? Like, we don't know that. I don't know how far it goes before, like, does the world fucking just blow up before it even becomes idiocracy, like, on this level? It's getting worse, and the anti-intellectualism that really like ramped up during COVID, the anti-expertise, this populist kind of like sentiment that's taking over all over the world. The left's kind of position of, well, we're trying to explain, but the podcaster, kind of the podcasticization, and we're speaking as podcasters, but not those kind,
Oh, absolutely.
It's kind of like podcasticization, however you want to make it into a verb, of 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 popular culture and of this shift to the right, is part of the machinery of idiocracy. And they're like, we also have to like be aware that the rulers of our idiocracy, some of them are also idiots, but not all of them are. And a lot of we are the ones that are being dumbed down. And the more we fucking, like, you can watch a movie, obviously, like, we're into it. And I'm very aware of and I struggle with this as a side note, is how to awaken to the political component to everything without reducing everything, art, music, literature, a cup of fucking coffee, sexuality, to the politic, to the political. Again, to be able to awaken to the political aspect or component of everything without necessarily like reducing everything to being political. That's a balancing act that I struggle with, because especially in this day and age, it's like we cannot fall asleep to the political element of everything, especially when our shit is in chaos. At the same time, it's like, how do you have a conversation with people where it's like this shit comes up, but it doesn't reduce the conversation to just politics, and just, or if you're gonna be on your phone, like, do you have to fucking be doom scrolling all the time? If you're gonna watch a film, are you always going to be applying it to bigger ideas? I mean, you should be able to work on multiple levels where we can derive meaning, and perspective, and look at story at the same time, and also be entertained and laugh. And like in a movie like this, like you say, you can laugh, but at the same time you can go, fuck, this is like so fucked up.
Yeah.
Because this is supposed to be, you would think that a film like this is supposed to be so ridiculous that you look at the person, if assuming you're watching it with someone, you're like, fuck, imagine if we lived in a world like that. Like, God, I'm so happy that we don't, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, how the fuck did we end up here? Like, this is supposed to be way worse than it like actually is, where it's just kind of like within reach. So this is one of those films where, to me, it brings out all of this shit, where it is amusing, but it's also terrifying. And it creates that kind of like tension within me where I'm just kind of like, fuck, like, how do I, and I think everyone's like trying to deal with, everyone who's politically aware and everyone who's fucking like, basically has some level of class consciousness that knows that fucking like, knows where they fucking stand or don't, or where they've fallen in terms of like where you are in society. And people who listen to this podcast, I'm sure like none of the rulers of the fucking world are listening to our podcast. The people in our podcast, I don't know what the fucking like, obviously, and I don't care about the income level and all that bullshit, but it's like, we're pretty much in the same fucking tax bracket.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most of us have, in general, the same kind of political leanings, because I think we're mostly, people who are going to listen to us are more interested in like the creative and in ideas and in art and in cinema and in music, etc. So I don't think any corporate fucking drones are fucking really listening to the show. But that being said, I imagine that we're all trying to, while we struggle with all our other bullshit, like, in terms of the day-to-day bills and modernism, like we are, or modernity, I should say, we're also struggling with like keeping our footing in the reality that is quickly changing because of what's happening in government as we speak. And it goes beyond that, where it's into the culture, where it's like the corporatization of the culture, but at the same time, the dumbing down. So like, how many of us are fucking addicted to our phones?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all for fucking entertainment. It's cool. Like, I'm not against fucking pornography. I'm not against, etc. The thing is that, and I mean, with a specific caveat to like, what is exploitation? Like, that's a different conversation. That it's like we can get into that, and we can talk about the like, what is pornography, etc. We've talked about that before, like early fucking on in the show, fucking 10 years ago. And in that sense, like the pro-sex element of pornography,
Yeah.
Versus the corporate element, because there is that too, and in that built in is exploitation. So with all that aside, that separate conversation, it's like I watch everything, but especially a film like this with those dueling like minds of like, I already go into shit like, all right, I'm watching a movie, but I'm also looking at the ideas. Something like this is also like, fuck, like the cultural, the socio-political, and at the same time, how does the movie work as a film? So I mean, like, I'm interested in obviously talking about both of those things, especially the thing that kind of like grabbed me is your description of the film being so short that it's not able to sustain itself as a film in terms of like the intensity or the pacing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about getting into like zooming into that as the film, and then so we can zoom out into the more obvious like cultural critique aspects of it. How does it fizzle out to you?
I think it becomes, sad to say, it becomes repetitive, and it becomes gags, and most of the best gags are at the beginning. So, there's some callbacks. I mean, as ridiculous as the show Ow My Balls is, every time that guy gets kicked in the balls, I'm laughing my ass off because, and it's laughing with a, not to put myself on a higher level, but a definite sense of irony, but also the humor in watching somebody get kicked in the balls, but also at the same time, this is something that would sell. People would watch this. And I mean, there's a, what do you call, there's a, on Instagram, I guess they're channels. They're not, it's not like YouTube. But anyway,
Yeah.
They're profiles, and it's called People Getting Hurt. And you can find yourself going down that rabbit hole of watching people jump off of roofs, missing swimming pools, or jumping off a roof onto a trampoline and missing a pool, or ollieing off of a skateboard and landing on their nuts. And there's a part of you that just laughs your ass off because you like watching other people in physical pain, but there's also part of you that likes to look at the stupidity of people. So where Mike Judge really kills it in this film, and you got to remember, this is the guy that created Beavis and Butthead, and Beavis and Butthead were written off in a lot of respects for being completely moronic. But if you watch those old shows, and if you watch what he was doing, it was a commentary. I mean, it was a commentary on how stupid we are as a, I don't know so much as a species, but as a culture, American culture, the teenage American. But not only that, he was mocking the entire world that existed around him, around these two guys. So what's great about Idiocracy is that his heroes are idiots, but they're the smartest idiots on a planet full of fucking retarded idiots. Much worse.
And
like, you know?
I
Yeah.
used to watch Beavis and Butthead. Like,
Yeah.
and he was also mocking MTV, and he was mocking MTV viewers because Beavis and Butthead are also watching videos. So you're watching them watch videos, and you're watching the videos that you watch with or without them. And they're making some of the same comments that you're making.
Yeah.
And then, so at the same time, you're like, fuck, like, it gives you some kind of perspective, because it's like, just because you thought of this doesn't mean you're fucking smart. Or just because you thought of it doesn't mean like you're special. Because these idiots are fucking thinking this too. And in that sense, it's like, it can also validate what you're thinking, which is probably obvious.
Yeah.
Especially if you're 13. At the same time, it's also like, well, there's the validity. With it comes the fact that it's not unique. Like this is, it's out there, and the critiques or whatever shit they're talking about some guy's hair in the video. It's kind of like, well, of course they are, because the guy's hair does look like that. So it has those levels of validation, or whatever you want to call them. And going back to the idea of like looking at people in pain, there's something interesting about that, because it's this is where it kind of does get to the idea of like, well, of like desensitization and how different forms of media can affect people. And again, like, it's like people like you and I, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I assume, I mean, I know you, and we've talked about this. We are not pro censorship.
No.
On my end, I'm more about like, be smart as a consumer. Like, I would rather be able to make the decision as to what I'm going to watch versus like have some seemingly arbitrary like decision made for me. With the I mean, if it's really extreme, like, then it's like obviously like the things that may pop into your mind, like the things that I think we agree should be things that involve abuse and people who cannot make decisions for themselves, and etc. Like, that's obvious. I'm talking about language, porn, topics, books. You know what I mean? I'm talking about, like, I don't think people should burn books.
Yeah.
I have this radical idea that people should not burn books, and that ideas, like, although they can be dangerous, should be analyzed and discussed. And I don't think that if you find out that a person is a piece of shit human being, like, because of their actions, but they've already like published all these works or done, I don't think that those books should be, that we should pretend that they don't exist. I think we should analyze those works, knowing what they did, and criticize those people for what they did. Even if, for example, the work, if you look at Picasso and you're like, well, Picasso was not someone that you should like try to be like when it comes to his personal life, because these are his flaws, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, Woody Allen knows how to make a movie. Roman Polanski knows how to make a movie.
Sure.
Miles Davis was an asshole, but damn, he could play a trumpet. He was abusive, but damn, he could play the trumpet. And I think you can make that distance. When it comes to, like, people in pain, you talked about that, like, going off of there's a segment in the film. Well, okay, the premise of the film is, because oftentimes we assume that people don't. The premise of the film is that this guy in the military, who is kind of just, he's considered like average in terms of intelligence, in terms of health, everything. He's completely average.
He's anonymous. I mean, he's just a guy that blends
Yes.
into the scene, and he does everything. But it's important to say that he does everything that he can to stay anonymous, to be as to be as
Middle of the road.
yeah, middle of the road and inconsequential to any given scenario. You know, they talk about they say it in the movie where it's like lead, follow, or get out of the way. I get out of the way,
Right.
and he's like, that's not the point of that. The point of that is to shame you into leading or to following. It's not to get out of the way. But it's like how many of us do just get out of the way and just. But it's like it's. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about because everything. I've always said it that the beauty of films and the magic of films is what they say about the world that we live in and our lives as individuals, how that is reflected, and how often do you find yourself just doing the best that you can to become anonymous in a job, in particular a job that I would say 60 to 75% of us do, which is basically some kind of retail or hospitality. Because let's be honest, that's the only shit that exists in this country anymore. Some kind of service. God knows we don't make anything anymore. God knows that we don't design anything, or it's all just we're a service. We're a service industry.
Or admin.
Or admin. Yeah. So it's like it's. This movie, you talk about a style of a director. Mike Judge has a style, and you see it from Beavis and Butthead through King of the Hill, his two animated shows, also his first film, Office Space, this one, and his last film, Extract. I mean, there is the monotony and the seeming ridiculousness of our daily lives and how each one of us, whether we acknowledge it, whether we're conscious of it, how often we just try to blend into the background because that is the path of least resistance.
Right. There's also, not to cut you off, but there's also there's an element of, and this is more addressed like in Office Space, that when you get into the politics of refusal, sometimes it's like you see the levels of ineptitude or corruption or hypocrisy or whatever that's involved in management.
Yeah.
And sometimes that turns you off to such a degree that you refuse. Like in my case, it's always like, well, I'm not going to be here very long because I have other shit that I want to do. And then something comes up or I get more comfortable or whatever it is, or, my fucking traumas, whatever, blah, blah. You end up staying longer and longer, and you avoid getting, I remember, I don't know if I misremember or I remember, but it's like from Casualties of War. And I feel like I remember this thing where it's like you don't go up in the ranks, you get sucked in, like deeper into the ant hole, into the ant colony or whatever, and like that feeling of now you'll become part of that machine, and you're gonna have to be it's too hard in that system to have as much integrity as you want to have. In order to be part of management. At the same time, that's the lead part, and so there's like the kind of like the reluctance to get into that. At the same time, the follow part is like, well, there's the idea that a lot of times people have, myself included, that's kind of like, well, I also need to try to find a way to like make my work meaningful to me while I'm here, to whatever like small degree that is, and I need some kind of level of like autonomy or ownership or something, so I have to try to make sense of this in a way that isn't just completely mindless. unless it's going to be like, or else let it be mindless, so that when I clock out, I can go do the shit that I love and like try to make something out of that. But oftentimes it's very difficult to do that. So it's kind of like you're in between the lead and the follow kind of thing. And then it's like, well, I'm so small in the machinery of this fucking system that like, okay, I'm just going to get out of the way, and I am going to just let the clock run out every day. I'll do what I need to do because everyone else is. The more I try to fix the situation, and this goes into idiocracy, like the harder it is for me because the system is larger than me, and it seems as though it can't be fixed. So I'm just going to fucking like spin the wheels. And so there's a level of like hopelessness in all of those options. And then you end up creating like this like distance between yourself and what you're actually doing, which is already like there's the level of alienation and there's all that shit, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so it becomes that Nine Inch Nails song, every day is exactly the same. And so then it's like, well, it's the Al Bundy thing. It's like you come home and you're all right. I'm just gonna fucking drink a beer and like fucking like fuck.
Yeah.
Then going back to what we were talking about with the pain thing, like, so then you start watching shit on TV or you start scrolling or whatever, and you start watching this stuff, and it's like, yeah, people like to watch other people get hurt, but it has to be, there has to be enough of a ridiculousness to it that the level of reality is kind of like distorted. Because if it's like most people are not going to watch someone get their fucking like fingernails torn out with pliers. They're not going to watch that. That like, they'll watch a cartoon with a big ass hammer and like someone gets smashed, and you know that it's like not real. You'll watch movies that look like explosions and all that, and it like, there has to be something there. But then once you start scrolling and watching people getting hurt, whatever that channel is that you're talking about,
people getting hurt, that's what it's called.
Then, and it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous enough that, but it's also just real enough that I think there starts to be a blur to the point where where shit actually, like, people are actually getting hurt. I think at that point we do start to lose perspective. If we scroll enough, if we're lost enough, if we're numb enough, we do start to lose a perspective about what's actually real. In the same way that we either have lost or we are rapidly losing our ability to tell, like, to really focus on what's happening outside of the screen, because we're so caught up in what's happening in the screen. And that when, like, something that seems very abstract to us is happening, but it's very real to someone in another country or etc. And that's how we're already like that as humans because of how tribal we are, etc. But we start to lose such a perspective and such a level of empathy that it's kind of like it's like and in those losses, we're also losing our ability to think critically. And when you start compounding all of those things, and we're focused only on fucking entertainment, and we're disengaging from all these other elements of our day-to-day life, eventually we start creating or co-creating or participating in a world where idiocracy starts to assemble itself. So you get to the point where, okay, back to what the movie is, this military guy who's fucking doesn't want to lead, doesn't want to follow, but they don't want him to get out of the way. They volunteer him to fucking be in an experiment where they're going to basically put him in a form of hibernation for a year. it goes wrong. Um, there's a scandal involved, etc. He ends up
A fucking hilarious scandal too, though. Don't be
yeah,
with a fucking milquetoast white military guy who falls into pimp culture, and it's full of stereotypes. It's very offensive. It's fucking hilarious. And you know who the pimp was?
no, who is it?
Scarface.
Oh, from the Ghetto Boys.
Yeah, it was Scarface from the Ghetto Boys. Continue, please.
Interesting. Yeah, so there's an Andrew Tate element to that in there somewhere.
Yeah,
and so then he wakes up in the future, 500 years in the future, and it's a world that is completely. I mean, it's recognizable in terms of like logos,
yeah,
and brands and companies and corporations, but everyone is basically what you would call an idiot.
Well, let's go back to that, because that brings in my favorite part of the movie. And this is kind of the problem when you hit it so hard right in the beginning, nothing else can compare. They do this. There's a narration and like a mini movie at the beginning talking about how the world has come to be what it is, and it's basically smart people are not having children. And this is something that you read about in Time magazine and the Atlantic. You read about this kind of thing where intelligent, well-to-do couples are holding off having kids for one reason or another. We're not, it's not economically viable yet, or the world is becoming a place that I'm not sure I want to raise kids in yet, or waiting for the perfect opportunity. And you see this couple who are together, well off, very into themselves, very pompous, and you can see their relationship slowly deteriorate as they give themselves excuses to not have a kid until it's time to have the kid, and they're both too old. Either he can't, his sperm count is too low, or her eggs are dead. That kind of shit, which is, something that happens, when you have women 40 some years old working on their career and deciding at 40, 41, 42, 45 that they want to have a kid now. There's that. That's paralleled with white trash rednecks just fucking like rabbits and having kids, and it looks like an episode of Cops. You remember that show, Cops?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's what it looked like. I mean, it looked like they just had a camera there and they were filming these people, and they're a fat, ugly white woman and her fat, slovenly husband who's fucking everybody in the neighborhood, forgets his wife's name or says something, and they come at each other, and you got the wives beating the shit out of each other. You got the kids, the high school kid. It was beautiful. He's a high school football player. I'm going to fuck all these bitches. I'm screaming. I'm sitting there laughing. And I had completely forgot about that part of the movie. But I was like, oh my God, this isn't even parody. This is not exaggerating something that is out there, that is moderately true. This is a Jerry Springer episode. And if you remember Jerry Springer, you'll know what I mean. This movie is inspired by the world that it existed in. Part of what Judge did was, his initial inspiration was he was at Disneyland, I believe, with his family. He was at Disneyland, and he saw these two fat women with their kids fighting and cursing with their kids, and he thought, it would be horrible if this is what the world became. Well, this is what the world has become. If I had any sense in my head, I would not be laughing at this movie. I'd be crying, because it's so
Yeah,
it's so
insane.
honest about what we are. But I'm a sick fuck, so I just find the humor in it. I find the humor while at the same time
That's
realizing how bad
yeah.
everything is.
That element is, I think, and I have problems with that portion.
Oh, that part you had a problem with?
Well, I have this is I'll tell you why. I
Okay.
have problems when you get into IQ.
Okay, yeah.
I have problems because the fucking next door neighbor of IQ is race science.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And I think it's like when you start to and then there's a lot there. So if you start to talk about, well, the smart people are not having kids, the dumb people are having all the kids, therefore like intelligence is, you reduce it only to genetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you take out like the element that involves like cultural values or behaviors, and you take out also like not only, and I'm not talking about, when I say cultural value, I'm not talking about ethnic shit. I'm talking about like later on they point to, oh, well, people aren't reading anymore, or people used to write movies. He gives this message at the end, and he's talking about how
What does he
reading
say?
and writing wasn't just for facts.
Reading and writing weren't just for facts. I'm sorry. That kills me.
I mean, and it's like, yes, because it's so indicative of kind of like, we do have those elements in culture that are like, okay, like it's like, you've talked about this where people are like, wait, you read? Why?
Yeah. I think
it's
go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's fucked up.
Absolutely.
No, and he says, yeah, reading and writing, those things weren't just for facts. People wrote books and movies. Movies had stories.
Yeah. Tell them what the number one movie in America, winner of 8 Academy Awards, was in the film. Ass. And it's just a shot of a guy's ass, and he's farting, and people are screaming in a theater. They love it. I thought I was laughing. I was crying. I was like, oh my God, this is who we are. Holy shit. This is not too far off. I think the danger of a movie like this, if there is any kind of real danger, is being dismissive of it.
Well, that is what I'm thinking when you go back to the IQ element, which is like it creates the kind of narrative where the way to not Elon Musk will look at this and be like, well, of course, what we have to do is we have to euthanize all the fucking dumb people, and only white billionaires like myself can propagate children, and that's why I have 100 kids.
But it's you know what I mean. I agree with you that IQ and eugenics and race they all maintain this uncomfortable truth in our society. Not truth, but they're lobbed into this reasoning.
Right.
But as
this
a
perspective,
perspective. But as a writer yourself, as a comedian, there as a comedian as I am, I think there's an understanding of the importance of generalities in telling a story in some cases. Yes. So like, let's say you and I, who come from, I think the problem is that you reach a point where, as egotistical as it sounds and probably is, there are those of us in this world who look around and say, I can't be the only smart one in this room. I can't be the only one that gets it. Holy fuck. And I struggle with this because there's a level of ego that when you start talking about intelligence, you invariably have to put other people down for their lack of intelligence, or their. In some cases, it's a lack of intelligence, which is not their fault. And in other cases, it's an embracing of ignorance, which is their fault.
Exactly. Right.
You know,
which goes to the cultural
mm-hmm.
element in terms of like, what are the values?
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, these are things that are short term enjoyments. Mm-hmm. That are being focused on, and a lot of times it is like it's consumerism. It's fucking
mm-hmm.
It's to the point where it's like you get used to the ads.
Yeah.
And that it's not necessarily a lack of attention. It's exactly what you said, an embracing of ignorance and a lack of attention to things. People are not paying attention in this world anymore. They're just kind of milling about. They're like in this zombie-like haze, and because their world is full of junk food, and it's full of
mm-hmm.
it's full of stupid entertainments.
Well, I mean, it's always been like that. I mean,
there have always been elements of that where it's like, yeah, after you fucking toil all fucking day long, like you go to the tavern and mm-hmm. You need to blow off steam. Like, yes, that is true.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing,
there's
though.
An element.
Yeah.
Huh?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But it's the whole culture has been made to, it's been like, well, books are stupid. This is stupid. No, what you want to do is you want to go to Starbucks and get a hand job. That's what you want.
Yeah.
That's what you want. And eventually it's like people are not paying attention and everything just slips into this abyss of ignorance. It's not even like it's not, this world isn't created because the so-called wrong people had too many kids and the right people didn't. It's because everyone made choices by choosing to ignore certain things and allowing for the corporations and a lot of times voting for these things and choosing these things, they chose to marginalize what once was in favor of the shallow, and the world became fucking shallow by going back. Okay, this guy wakes up in the future in this fucking world. Quickly they realize that he's the smartest person in their world, even though he is supposedly of average intelligence in general. So he's taken into the White House. The president is a former wrestler. They have they're in this drought. They have this dust bowl. They can't figure out why. Well, it's because fucking Gatorade, whatever the brand that is mm-hmm. basically Gatorade.
Brano. Yeah.
It's one of these sports drinks. It fucking, it owns everything.
Mm-hmm.
And because the corporations have taken over all of these, the FDA and the FCC, and like, sound familiar, it's that. So they're watering crops. Well, they're not watering crops because they're watering crops with fucking sports drinks, and they don't know why the crops are not growing.
Yeah, but it's very telling is that in their limited capacity, it makes sense to them. Brano has electrolytes. Electrolytes
right.
or why you make Brano. That's what makes us, I mean, it's the level of
And
stupidity. Because how often do you talk to somebody where they'll give you a circular reasoning where you're listening to them say, you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. And a lot of times people talk in a way to hear themselves speak. And I think that's what's great about this movie. This movie is dead on in it. If anything, this movie is honest about the culture and the faults of the culture, where it doesn't. The problem I have with the movie, I think it has a false hope, which I think it would have been a much more biting satire if there had been no salvation at the end, if there had been no happy ending, or at least as happy an ending as this film is able to muster. If it had gone completely to shit because that's what we're designed to do, I would have laughed a hell of a lot harder, and I would have thought it was a more damning and braver statement. Now, that being said, what is on the screen is a very powerful statement on the stupidity of the species, but more importantly, the stupidity of the American cultural identity. I was talking to this woman I know, and she's European, and she said that this movie had been recommended to her by some other people that she knew, and they said it was so funny. And I said, well, who are these people? And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, are they Americans or are they European like you? And she's like, they're European. She said, I got told by another Czech woman and a French person. And I said, that says a lot. That says a fucking lot. That says that you Europeans are making a statement about us, which I don't fault in any way.
right.
I recognize it. I mean, and it says a lot about how we are perceived throughout the world. So
Absolutely.
There was a part of me that thought, would this play in other countries? Because they might not understand the culture and what is being parodied and what's being,
American culture is like exported, like
yes. And that's a good point. That's the point that I was getting to, is that everybody knows who we are and what we are. The sad thing is, this Idiocracy is an exaggeration, is an extreme exaggeration of where we are. It's not an exaggeration of where we're going. I think it's pretty dead on in that respect. It's an exaggeration of where we are. My issue is, my God, I imagine that the French, the Germans, Russia, and everywhere else in the world looks at us like these fucking fat, slovenly, violent, idolatry people. Where like this is who we are, and now that we have a complete fucking moron in the White House, they can throw this movie in our face and say, Mike Judge is a goddamn Nostradamus. He's a fucking, he sees into the future. He saw this 19 years ago. And
this is not something. This is embraced. This is what this
great point. Yeah,
this Idiocracy, the culture of this film, is a version of American culture that is embraced basically by at least half of the country at this point.
Well, I mean, okay, so I want to give a little bit of perspective on what this movie is. 2006, which means it was probably written in 2003, 2004, developed, shot in 2005, released, very limited. I mean, they dumped this movie because the studio had no idea what to do with it. And it's kind of a difficult film to find because they don't want to. 20th Century Fox really regrets making this movie because it there is no product placement in this movie. It's all products, and they're being insulted. Starbucks as a whorehouse, basically. You get hand jobs and a latte. Hand job, ridiculous. Costco. And the Costco was originally a Walmart, but for some reason they changed it to, I don't know why, but visually it looks better as a Costco. Carl's Jr. All of this shit is on screen designed to show how stupid, fat, and self-consumed we are. Now, so that's 2005, 2006, the second George Bush presidency, or the second term of his presidency. In addition to the cultural landscape, one of the most popular shows on television wasn't Ow My Balls. It was Johnny Knoxville, Steve-O, and a bunch of idiots beating the shit out of each other on a show called Jackass.
Yeah.
I mean, it's he wasn't stretching too far. He wasn't. The only thing is that there's not a Jerry Springer reference in the movie, but it's all over the film because that's what they are walking around. If you do yourself a favor, not you, but you, the listeners, do yourself a favor and YouTube some old Jerry Springer episodes. It's amazing the level of proud ignorance that existed in that audience. And it's not like we're a whole hell of a lot better now. Jerry Springer shows have been replaced by judge shows. Miss Pat, Divorce Court, Paternity Court, and this is all shit that I'm at my mom's house and she watches and I'm like, you don't help yourself by watching this shit. This is fucking stupid, Mom.
I mean, and we had there were versions of that before too. It was Judge Wapner and whatever the fuck it was,
but it wasn't to the level of
and TMZ TMZ comes out of that because
TMZ. I completely forgot. Yeah. Because
Harvey Levin was on the People's Court. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, well, I go back to the Doug Llewellyn days.
Huh?
I go back to the Doug Llewellyn days.
Yes. Yeah.
Harvey Levin replaced him.
Yes.
For those who don't, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I remember Judge Wapner in the People's Court. Yeah.
Now we're in our time machine, but it's yes, all of this shit existed, but even talk shows before the Jerry Springer really took it to that level. At one point, I mean, they were all like exploiting fucking all this bullshit, but at one point they were actually like the Donahues of the world were actually talking about hot button issues, and fucking people were disagreeing and arguing, and at least, I mean, they were exploiting like the controversy because that's what the whole argument was. But at least it was something that was made out to be either it was relevant or it was made to be relevant. If it was Geraldo, like, and all of that performative shit, like, well, it was fucking, and we'll get into this when we talk about some white supremacy stuff, but American History X and that, but like, there were Nazis and fucking, or if it's Manson or Satanism or drugs or something like that, it was
G.G. Allen,
well, yeah, G.G. There you go, G.G. Allen. I think he was on Jenny Jones, and I don't know who else.
Look that one up.
And the Jenny Jones had her thing where someone actually died because of looking into that. But,
homophobia, I remember.
But the point is that once it was only just drama, and it was the same premise, but it was just fucking, who's the dad? You're not the dad, and now these people are going to fight, and they're going to roll around on the floor. And it was even different than, I used to like to watch Wally George. But built into the Wally, it was so fucking like ridiculous Because the audience was very much like this Orange County like mob of just like skaters and fucking random people, and they would just it was already built to be absurd, and you knew that Wally George was this right winger fucking Republican that like you hated.
Yeah.
And the guests were fake and they were stupid. And it was there was something about it that I was reading it even then as something ironic.
Yeah.
With the sex ads that were coming on in between, even though he's like this Christian conservative, and
hey, you need sponsors, man. So I get it.
Absolutely, of course. And you know there were the phone sex ads back then.
Yeah.
Google that. If you don't know what that is, Google phone sex. Anyway, it's just this gradual, like slipping, reality TV, slipping, and then ultimately, like reality TV has never been so-called reality.
Yeah.
But it becomes one of those things again where it's like we lose perspective on what is real, what's entertainment, you're talking about circular logic and circular reasoning, and people just giving these answers about, well, it has electrolytes. Not only is it circular reasoning, it just becomes the parroting of talking points and the parroting of corporate slogans that the people start to use. Well, it has electrolytes, and that's what we need, and whatever the line is that it's from the commercial. And what does Red Bull do?
It gives you wings.
It gives you wings. How do you know that?
Because I hear it every day.
You hear it every fucking day. And if you're not careful, like, you just take it for granted. Fox News is fucking fair and balanced. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course it is. And in this, Fox News is basically like professional wrestling, which, of course it is also. Costco becomes a fucking, like, a center. It's not only like...
Call it what it is, a Mecca.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's this guy is taking them to Costco. He's guiding him through this world, and he's like, this is where I got my law degree. At Costco?
I love that.
And he's like, yeah, my dad pulled a few strings. And it's so fucking large, this building.
Yeah.
This complex. That he's like, we need to go to electronics or whatever he says. He's like, it's about an hour from here. And it's like, there are like skyscrapers inside the Costco. And it's like, I don't know, have you ever been to the Mall of America?
No, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, it's and this is something that is seen as like
a great structural accomplishment, a great capitalist. It was advertised as the biggest indoor mall in the world. Like, that was something to be proud of. It had a roller coaster. You've been there, okay?
Yeah, one time we went on tour. We were in
Minneapolis,
in the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, I only saw a fraction of it because we didn't spend that much time. But I was just kind of like, yeah, this is fucked up. This is really fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, the metaphor is fucked up. And it's like, it's not the Mall of America. It's that America is quickly becoming just a mall.
Yeah. Well, Bill Hicks had a joke about that where he was talking about one day there will be tunnels that connect malls to one another, and you'll never have to leave the mall. It's just one tunnel to another, one mall to another mall, and you just boom. And like, what is it? And we grew up with mall culture, where the mall was the thing, but that's a kid thing. And it's amazing to me that they talk about malls dying like they're an actual thing. Malls that have died, that are no longer, that are these ghost towns. They talk about them like they were a real, like a living, breathing creature.
But also, like, there's something that now you bring that up, and we're off on all these tangents, but
that's this movie. There's no way of not being off on tangents in this movie.
And this is who we are. Yeah. But the mall rat culture, and I wasn't that person. But the mall rat culture, it's not like. I mean, there were those that would go and shop and like with their moms or whatever, like whatever kind of thing. But like kids on skateboards hanging out at the mall, they weren't like buying shit at the mall.
No,
they were loitering. They were just hanging out and using the mall as their park. And yeah, they would buy fucking like an orange Julius and a fucking corn dog or whatever the fuck they got.
Yeah.
Or, when I went to the mall, like, I went to the mall to buy fucking concert tickets.
Because there was a Ticketmaster there?
There was a fucking Ticketmaster at the fucking Music Plus. Okay, so look that up. Herodotus fucking wrote about it, in the ancient tablets, like Music Plus. There was or I went to fucking Sam Goody.
I remember that.
And most of the time I didn't buy shit.
Yeah.
All I did was just fucking look around. Or when there was fucking Blockbuster music and you could listen to fucking albums there, that's what I would do, and then I would leave. So you know what I mean? Like it was that. These people these kids are like, there's something to that where they're like, they're not engaging, not only because like a lot of times they didn't have money, but they weren't engaging with the mall as consumers. They were getting kicked out of the mall. They're fucking riding their skateboard. There's something where it's like they were using it for themselves because it was a place to congregate and just go fuck around. And then they would wander off to the next thing. That's different from where we're at now, where it's like, well, you are the fucking mall. Like, your phone is the mall. The mall is in your fucking pocket. Like, you don't need tunnels to connect so you never leave the mall. You're getting the mall delivered to you every fucking day. And all you have to do is just click on it and be like, yeah, like, this is amazing. Like, the mall is in your mind already. Like, Amazon got us.
No, it's absolutely true.
Leave. It's not Bill Hicks is like, you'll never have to leave the mall. Now it's not that. It's you cannot leave the mall. You cannot leave the mall.
Well, the mall doesn't leave us.
Exactly.
That's
we live in the mall.
Yeah.
The mall is our reality. And this is part of Idiocracy. This is part of the state of the world, the state of at least of the country is like, it's bigger than the IQ. It's bigger than how so-called smart you are. It's like, what are we choosing? And in the film, there's a moment where there's this gladiatorial event, right? And he tries for like one last time to really explain. And he's like, and it was so relevant to me, like, to hear that, because it's kind of like, well, yeah, this is where we're fucking at. Like, do you really want to live in a world where you try to blow up the one person who's helping you? And everyone pauses and they're like, yeah. And then they just try to fucking kill him. Because it's like, yeah, JFK Jr., yeah, COVID doesn't exist. Yeah, Let's bring back polio and measles. Yeah. Let's fucking have the richest man in the world fucking gut the fucking federal government and fire all these fucking people and deport all these people, and let's build resorts in Gaza, and let's fuck over the farmers who voted for us, and let's fuck over all the people who voted for us and all the people who didn't vote for us, and then like it's kind of like wake the fuck up. Like, this is just as much of a wake-up film as, like, if you want to say something like The Matrix or something like... And any of these films where it's kind of like the character snaps out of it and he's like, whoa, what the fuck? You know, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're taking it all the way back.
The most obvious comparison is Back to the Future 2, which is basically what the world would be if Donald Trump took over. And,
right.
You know, that's it. It's Biff's. I mean, the movies are warnings in some cases. They're entertainment, but they're warnings as to what could happen if you lose perspective. If you I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she's a much older woman, and she was telling me, she's 78, and she was telling me that she was part of the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, and they thought that they had beat this thing.
Right.
And she was talking about how she's too old and she's too tired now for the fight. She can't do it again. And I said, the failure was letting the younger generation believe that everything was fixed. You know, so you commend all those people who died on those front lines. You commend all of those people who suffered, who went to prison, who marched and fought against something that was an oppressive society, because, you know, like I'm always quoting Carlin, there are no such things as rights. There's just privileges, and you have to fight to get them. There comes an acknowledgement of, if you close your eyes to the reality of the world, don't be surprised when the world goes to shit. And Idiocracy is the end game. The problem is, the end game won't be funny. We have a distance so that we can watch Idiocracy and laugh. And I'm laughing. I'm laughing hysterically in this movie. I haven't laughed out loud at a movie in a long time. You just don't do it, especially when I'm by myself and I'm watching it. I just don't have those chuckles, you know? This one made me fucking laugh. But I guess the honesty of it just kind of eventually got to me. Where I was like, oh, God. Yeah, that's funny, but shit. Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. It's in a weird way, it's kind of depressing.
I find us, like, I'm in this thing, and we talked about the 60s recently, and I'm just kind of like, you know, your friend grew up in the 60s.
Yeah.
Your friend was a young adult in the 60s. And if you think about, I don't know if you've read it, Tom Wolfe's The Me Decade.
I know the book. I haven't read it.
The transition from the 60s, communal, kind of, all the stuff that you think about with 60s counterculture, which was involved with the expansion of the mind through psychedelics. It was the music. It was the civil rights. It was all of these different rights and power movements. It was the turmoil of all these assassinations, from the president to the president's brother to Malcolm X to Martin Luther King Jr., like all this other shit, right? Woodstock, all this stuff, to the crashing down of the big fucking end of the 60s, which is fucking the Manson murders in Altamont, which was the Woodstock of the West Coast that went horribly wrong. And it's like the transition from this kind of like, we can fucking fight the power, we can fucking like, we can have a total fucking counterculture and a total way of looking at the world, and we can do this, we can fix this, to seeing aspects of that collapse and a turning away from one another towards just kind of like that idea of like, I think Tom Wolfe says it, of the taking the money and running. Where if we try to create a coherent like narrative or a coherent timeline, it's like, okay, it went from that into fucking, look what we got in the 80s, with the yuppies and all that shit, to the complete fucking ironic nihilism of fucking and cynicism of the 90s, to fucking, I guess, sincerity again after 9/11, where it's kind of like, now fucking Taylor Swift is the dominant cultural fucking symbol because, like, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's I've read about that being the number one, like, sign of postmodernism does not exist anymore because Taylor Swift is possible, and she's completely unironic. That being said, it's kind of like, where we're at now, we're seeing ourselves slip into the fucking pit of idiocracy even more. And so many of us who are against what's happening are Luke Wilson, or whatever the actor's name is, the main
Luke
character, who is like, do you really want to live in a world where you blow up the one person who's trying to help you? And you know, and obviously it's like, we're trying to help ourselves, but we're also trying to like prevent this shit from happening. And the vibe right now, the cultural moment right now is like, yeah, we do. At the same time, we have these little moments of like, the Luigi Mangione thing was crazy because it's like, it was like a glitch in the matrix in that people also liking our outlaws and all that bullshit. Like, people were able to create this narrative of like this vigilante guy who went against the fucking corporate whatever. That was cool. But then it's kind of like, that's weird that so many people on both sides of the aisle and from different perspectives are celebrating. And I'm not trying to inflate the amount of people who are actually into it. I'm just saying as a sample.
Yeah.
That people could understand that as a reaction to the predatory nature of that, like those types of systems and like corporate bullshit. That it's like, well, of course, we're gonna go with this Robin Hood kind of like vigilante, Batman, whatever the fuck you want to, however you want to describe it, falling down basically. But only in the most extreme entertainment kind of colored kind of way, where it's like, only if it can be compared to a film, only if it can be compared to some character, only in this weird abstract, not in the reality, and only when we can point our attention towards it as some peripheral entertaining thing on a screen versus like what's happening every fucking day, where, nah, let me go get my Starbucks hand job. I forgot what we were trying to do. Oh shit, we were going to grow crops. I forgot. It's a crisis of attention.
Well, there's a great line in the beginning of the movie where the narrator says, the great scientists could have worked on it, but they were too preoccupied, or they were too focused on the public's preoccupation with hair regrowth and erectile dysfunction.
Right.
It was little shit like that where it's like the vanity, greed, and self-absorption. I sometimes wonder if we deserve to survive this shit as a whole, as a species. I know that there are individuals in this world that are doing good things. I recognize that. But sometimes as a whole, I imagine that maybe we are the worst thing for this planet. And if you look at it objectively, do we deserve to continue? If I were to be on the outside looking in, I don't know if I could defend us. And as you watch this movie, it becomes increasingly difficult to defend us. Now, there are going to be those out there who are like, it's just a movie. It's a parody. It's a satire. You guys are taking it way too seriously. But I don't think that's the case. I think this movie does more to shine a light on the darkness of our stupidity than anything else that has come out in a long time.
Yeah,
and I think it says something that the 20th Century Fox did everything that they could to bury the movie. I mean, they buried it. They produced it. Once they got it and they saw it, they were like, we can't release this. We'll piss off Costco. We'll piss off Starbucks. The public won't go for it because, who's going to want to be told that they're a bunch of idiots? I don't even know what the reception is of the great majority of people. Do they watch it for the satire that it is? Do they take in the warning? I mean, right. What do you think?
I don't know, because I think there's a variety of responses to anything. A lot of people just kind of like ignore. A lot of people fucking lead follower, get out of the way. A lot of people fucking are like, well, yeah, that's how it is. Like this complete like just throwing up of the hands and being like, man, fuck it. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, that's what it is. Like, just let Trump be Trump. Like, just fuck it.
Yeah.
Or it's just like, well, if the world is gonna burn, like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. Like, I'm gonna get mine. Well, I don't care. Fuck it. Like, I don't care what they're doing anywhere. I'm just going to pretend that it is what it is, and I'm just going to do my little fucking shit until the wheels fall off of my fucking world, and then I'll cry about it.
I heard a comic refer to it one time as we're turning this planet in like the rental car that it is. We just don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
You
don't fill a gas tank. You just fucking... Yeah, I mean, it's there's no please be kind, rewind, fucking, we just fucking let it run out and turn it in like that. If we even find it, because it's like, oh, well, I own it now, because now I owe fucking $2,000 at the video store because I don't know where the video is.
Yeah.
And Jon Stewart, I think Jon Stewart fucked up. Jon Stewart recently was like, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, I want to be very specific about language, so I'm not going to call the situation right now fascist, because I feel like the left was crying wolf, basically, by constantly using fascists. They used up all their fascist bullets, and so that if and when like this actually veers into that, there will be no ammunition left to call it that, because we've already called it that before. And I think that's another kind of example of how people would react to something like this, where it's just kind of like, yeah, don't overreact, because it's not a warning, it's an exaggeration. Like, we're not there yet.
Sure.
Complain when we're there. Don't be premature about this. That, of course, that's like that completely removes any aspect of like preventative anything, because at that point it's like there's no sense of mitigating disaster. There's only, don't be preemptive, wait for the disaster, and then fucking call it a disaster. Well, at that point it's too late. And at that point, if you live in idiocracy and you've bought in to idiocracy, then you no longer see it. You no longer see idiocracy. You just embody it. And so I don't know. At this point, it's like, this is a fucking warning. There are so many warnings. The question is like, okay, like, what do you do with that warning? Like, how much power do we even have? That's for each of us to kind of determine in our own world, in our own day to day. But it's like, for me, in terms of doing this, for me, it's a call to clarity, and it's a call to attention, and it's a call to, and Leslie and I are like, we're having these talks of like, how do we fucking like, at this point, how do we strike a balance of engaging with the state of the world enough, disengaging enough to where we keep our mental health and our fucking like, you know what I mean? All our shit, like what we're doing.
No, definitely.
And not just fucking, huh?
No, definitely. I'm saying definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we focus our attention on things in a way that's very deliberate, and our money on things that are very deliberate, our care, our everything, so that the words we speak, the thoughts we think, the actions we take are as much as possible our own, so that the stuff that we consume is something that as much as possible we are choosing. And so if you and I, Rick and I, if we're recommending films, yes, it's like, you're going to have a good time with this, or you're not going to have a good time with this, but it's going to give you something that you can use potentially in your own life that's beyond just 2 hours or an hour and a half, 90 minutes, whatever. That's basically for you to masturbate with. There's plenty of opportunity for that, in this world already. This is, I don't know, we never sat down 10 years ago and said, like, this is our mission statement for the podcast. This is our goal for the fucking podcast. A lot of shit we talk about anyway, in the same way that I know, like, our listeners, you people out there fucking talk to your people about shit because it comes up, and I know, like, you guys think about shit. You guys are dealing with shit just like everyone else. The point is for us to be able to kind of work it out in front of you, and let you in on that, so that then you can go and do your version of that. And there's a sense of like, we're all looking at these fucking screens, or these screens are all flashing different shit in front of us, but I'm like, and Rick is like, check this out. This might be beneficial, or this might be interesting, or this might stimulate this, or this might inspire, or this might warn you, or this might fucking scare you, and you need to see it. Timothy Leary, the LSD fucking guru, was like, find the others. Like, that was one of his things. It's like, find the others. And if there's nothing, I mean, there are other things I think we can draw from the 60s that hopefully we can make work now. If nothing else, it's like find the others, find the films that are going to not numb your mind. Find the others, find the films. Do that. Connect to certain things and disconnect from others, and empower yourself through cinema. It can do that.
Absolutely. You can.
It's powerful enough to do that.
I don't know if you can change the world as an individual, but you can change the world for somebody around you. You can help them understand it. You can help yourself. And literature, music, films, painting, art serves that purpose in our life. As bad as it may seem, as bad as it is, art is a reprieve. Art is hope in a way that nothing else is. I'm taking my nephew to see Unforgiven next week at the local movie theater. He's never seen it. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk about friendship. We're going to talk about obligation. We're going to talk about recognizing who you are. There's a lot to be said. I don't take him to see a movie just to take him to see a movie. We talk about them. We talk about what the movies mean. And I think he grows a little bit from it. I love talking about movies because they're meaningful. And if somebody listening can watch this movie and both laugh their ass off at what they're seeing, but also listen to what we have to say and say, my God, it's a lot deeper than I thought it was. Or I hadn't seen that angle. I'm thankful to those guys. Then, I feel like we did something. It might not mean anything to a lot, but it means enough to the people out there that do listen, and it means a lot to me and you. I'm very proud of what we do here. And I'm glad that we could shine a light on movies that either slip through the cracks or you've never heard of, or even films that everybody knows that we're talking about yet again. I love this. Yeah. So
this one goes to Robert. Thank you, Robert, for your donation. Relatively new listener. This is the beginning. Find the others. He found this. Tell others. Find your films. Do your thing. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. Times are tough. We get it. Whatever you can do, we appreciate it. We'll see you next time.